You got to really ride a fine line, especially in the retail space, in my opinion, with creating an ambassador community because you don't want to take away too much control of the creative freedom from the creator in itself. You onboarded them for a reason. You believed in them for a reason, and so it's important that you provide some guidance and maybe a little bit of feedback, which you also have to be very strategic in wording, which I didn't know in the beginning.
This is Social Pulse Podcast Retail Edition, your go-to guide to solving your biggest retail social media marketing challenges authentically. I'm your host, Mike Allton, and each episode is an honest and frank look at what marketers go through, from awful algorithms to terrific trends and ideas that you can apply to your own business. And now, the rest of today's episode. Welcome to our first episode of Social Pulse Podcast Retail Edition, where we're digging into the challenges, successes, and stories of social media and community professionals in the industry, just like you. Subscribe to gain valuable insights that you'll be able to apply to your own work and social presence from each and every episode. Now, influencer marketing has grown into a $21 billion industry, which likely isn't a surprise to you. What may be a surprise is that 60% of brands work with at least 10 influencers. That's a lot of external advocates to have to identify, manage, build processes for, and execute campaigns with. Building out a formal influencer or ambassador community is a lot of work and can be extremely challenging to those new to the practice. Where do we start? What are some potholes to avoid? That's what Jeremy Linaburg is here to help us with. Jeremy is a social media and community building nerd. He says after undergrad, he loved marketing so much that he got his master's in marketing from the College of William and Mary. Jeremy is a social media specialist for Swim Outlet and Sporty, both of which are competitive swim-focused retail companies. As a social media specialist, Jeremy is in charge of curating and managing all social platforms for both accounts, along with assisting with their ambassador community. He's worked with Andrew and Pete, Andrew Davis, and many other communities. Hey, Jeremy, welcome to the show.
Hey there, how's it going?
So glad to have you here. I know we were talking in the green room. You and I have been connected for many, many years. This is the
Yes.
first chance we're able to actually talk one-on-one. So thank you for that. It's just you and I. Nobody's listening. So you're, free to share all the little secrets, spill all the tea, do all the things. So
Awesome. Well, I
tell
love
us.
spilling the tea. I love spilling the tea. So I will definitely.
Fantastic. So tell us about the work you're doing at Swim Outlet today and tell us about Swim Outlet overall.
Yeah, so first of all, I'm super excited to be here to tell you all about the swimming space along with the social media space. These are two passions that I have. They were meshed together about a year ago when I joined Swim Outlet. Swim Outlet is one of the largest retail brands for swimming in the world. They carry a bunch of different styles of brands, and it's really focused on e-commerce, and we've built up a really strong and powerful social media community that is built around people that love swimming and that have different varieties of swimmers as well. We kind of talk about and partner with and target, coaches, young athletes, collegiate athletes. It's very focused on swimming, but there's a broad kind of targeted audience as well. And the Swim Outlet community specifically is super engaged. We have a pretty engaged following within our social media platforms. And hopefully I'll be able to dive into that a little bit more here shortly. But the overarching premise is Swim Outlet is a retail company that, carries swim products.
Very cool. In fact, I was talking to our community manager, Deb Mitchell, here at Agora Pulse. Her son happens to be a competitive swimmer. He was swimming for the University of Wyoming. So they're longtime fans and customers of Swim
Yeah.
Outlets. And she was excited to have you on the show.
Yeah, and it's really cool because for me, like it has a personal connection for me. I was a lifelong swimmer. I started competitively swimming, when I was in ninth grade. I swam all through college as well, and I still swim today. I compete at the master's level and at different national meets and that kind of stuff. So it's really cool to be able to work with a brand that has kind of brought you up. And now working for them has been a dream of mine. I mean, it's incredible to have the position that I have and do really cool things with the community. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. But
yeah.
you weren't necessarily heavily involved in the back end. So when you joined this new company, you're taking over their social media. That's always a
Mm.
challenge. But then one aspect that was particularly challenging for you was figuring out how to manage an ambassador community. Tell us
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, so transparently, I have never done that before. I mean, I've been in the social space for about 7 to 8 years now, I believe. I can't even remember at this point. But I've never had the opportunity or had to kind of moderate or control or help create and develop an ambassador community. And at Swim Outlet, I have an incredible boss. His name is Reese Gonzalez. He's, again, a lifelong swimmer. He's the director of social media and influence there. And he actually started the program with Swim Outlet, meaning he started the ambassador program when he came on board. And basically, it grew really quickly and he needed help with it. So they hired me along with doing the social media and stuff. And it was really daunting in the beginning because I had never done that before. I had been a part of ambassador programs from different things that I've done on my own with small influencing and that kind of stuff, but to manage it, I had never really done that. And so it was a bit interesting to get into the back end of things and see that there are actually so many idiosyncrasies and things that you have to take into consideration and think through when developing programs such as an ambassador program. And I didn't realize that not only was it hard to kind of search for the ambassadors, figure out which ones are going to parallel really well with your brand, interview them, connect with them, DM with them, along with bringing them on and then having to onboard them, get them understanding of, what the goals are, what the objectives are, and then following up with them, right? And trying to make sure that we're getting the content that we need, that they're happy with what they're getting. And all of these things, along with sending them product, which I'd never done before, is a lot of work from a back end perspective. So, yeah, there were a lot of things that were super challenging for me. But honestly, that's kind of been my whole life. There's been a lot of challenges in my personal journey. So I was kind of up for that task because I wanted to learn and grow in it anyway. And since then, we have grown it exponentially. We're continuing to grow and do really cool things. But those were some of like the obstacles in the beginning when kind of jumping into, helping continue this ambassador program.
I completely relate to everything you just said because that's exactly what I had to do when I joined
Mm,
Agorapulse in 2018. We had the skeleton of an ambassador program. It was 10 people, myself included, that the
mhm,
CEO was personally managing, which means we weren't being managed. We weren't being
uh,
tracked, right? So he hired me to come in and build that program. And,
mhm,
we quintupled the size of the ambassadors after I joined, and we had to build all those processes and send them swag and do all the things that you just talked about.
yeah.
But when you were brought in, you had somebody else who'd already kinda started the program,
Mhm,
similar to
mhm,
me, but it sounds like they did a lot more than our CEO had been doing at the time. What were some of the specific details or the processes that you needed to figure out how to
mhm.
build?
Yeah, for us, we really wanted to focus on being super aggressive with engaging with the current community, the current ambassador community, along with being super aggressive with building it. And one of my main tasks was to basically kind of have conversations with the current ambassador community and really analyze the content that they had been creating to determine A, if they were happy with the program, B, if we were happy with the style of content that they were creating, and then C, trying to have, you know, really deep conversations around what is it that you're wanting as an ambassador? What is it that other ambassadors might be interested in having when onboarded? And these are kind of questions that I was kind of stuck with basically to kind of go through and ask of the current ambassador community. And then after figuring that out, taking several months to just understand the style of content, understand our current ambassadors, understand the way that each of them create, because that's a whole nother element to our ambassador strategy in and itself, because our ambassador strategy, and so we needed to make sure that the style of content, the types of content that these ambassadors were creating were directly correlated to our overall social media strategy goals and objectives, along with the brand values and missions of Swim Outlet and Sporty in and itself. So after kind of figuring all of that out, we were then, not we, I was then tasked with going and searching for more ambassadors. And that kind of came up with, or we kind of came up with a way to do that. So we have a very, very active social media community on Instagram and TikTok specifically. Those are the main platforms we focus on. And so we started to use ways, Instagram stories, direct DMs, very intentional conversations with people that we were interested in having joined the program to search for more ambassadors. And since then, we've onboarded, actually, I just did this last week. We onboarded about 15 new ones. And along with that, both male and female. And along with that, I'm going to be ordering product and stuff for them today. So again, it's kind of that back end of, once you determine, it's not really back end, I guess it's more so strategy, Mike, that I would talk about is like there's just multiple steps to carrying out a community. And so once we figured out what was working and what didn't work and what our ambassadors wanted and didn't want, then we went and searched for and continue to search for ambassadors and people that want to be a part of the Swim Outlet fam. And then the step further of getting them the product, making sure that it's the right sizing, that it's communicated correctly, that they're happy and that kind of thing. So those are some tangible things that I really had to do in the beginning. And that's not even including amping up the sporty social media strategy. That's been like my baby, since I've been joining, or since I've joined, I guess I should say. And so that's like layered on top of my main role as a social media specialist. So all of it has been a lot of amazing, super awesome, cool work I've been able to do. And we're just continuing to grow and kind of build this ambassador program and strategy.
That's really fascinating. When you first started, how many ambassadors did you guys have?
Oh gosh. Okay, let me think. I would say probably, I think it was around like 15, maybe 15 females, and then around, I think it was 4 males, I believe. Those are just rough numbers.
Yeah, yeah. So we're talking about 18 or 20 individuals. Because you talked
Mhm,
about how you spent a couple months basically talking to them, reviewing the work that they'd been doing, the tone and
mhm,
everything, which is 100%. For all of you listening, you should be doing exactly what Jeremy just talked about doing. You should absolutely be looking at exactly what are your ambassadors posting, not just
mhm,
about you, but in general, right?
mhm,
What's their worldview? What's their tone? What's their style? How are they engaging with their community? These are all absolutely best practices. But I'm curious if you could share a little more detail about specifically how did you talk to them? Did you set up one-on-one meetings?
mhm,
Were you just spending time every day looking at all their social profiles? What
mhm.
were the details there?
Yeah, so the main thing I did was because I didn't know them, right? Reese,
Right.
my boss, knew them because he onboarded them, he sifted them out in the very beginning. And I'm very like I'm a person that's very I want to know who you are. I want to know more about you. Like I'm very what's the word? Like connections are really important to me and I don't want it to just be, over the phone or something like that. So I wanted to go and learn a lot about these ambassadors. So the first part is I went and literally looked at every Instagram and every TikTok for every ambassador. Those are the two things that we require them to post on because again, that's our main focus in our social strategy. So I went through every single one of them and learned about them way past content. Some of them had been with us for 2 years already. Some of them had only been with us for 2 months. So I went through and looked at all of their stuff. And then I went and we have a WhatsApp chat. So I introduced myself in there, asked some questions, started to stir some conversation in there to get to know them a little bit more as well. And then from that point, I DM'd them and we just had conversations through DMs because the problem is a lot of these athletes are in high school and in college. We have a few that are a little bit older and do like master
Mhm.
stuff, but I didn't want to bombard them with a bunch of like meetings like, hey, can you get on this Zoom and that kind of stuff because they just don't have the time. As if any of you all know, swimmers wake up super early and go to practice really early, go to school all day most of the time or go to work all day and then have another training session at the end of the day. And so I don't like I just wanted to be mindful of their time in terms of like a one-on-one meeting, but and again, even as a social media manager and a community manager, it was a lot for myself to make sure that I was answering all of those DMs and staying consistent with them because I wanted them to know that I was seeing them as soon as they came in. Does that make sense? And so I didn't want to wait a day to respond, because then it's showing that I don't really genuinely care about their response to my question in the first place. So, yeah, it was a lot of like in the weeds of connecting with these athletes and people, which was a lot of time spent. I'm I normally work like 8 hours, but in the social media space, like in my opinion, I like to be on a lot because they could be DMing me at 11 o'clock at night because that's when they're going to bed and finally getting on their phone. So I was having conversations sometimes that late, or, a lot of our ambassadors and athletes are on the West Coast. So it's,
Mm.
midnight my time, but 9 o'clock their time. So yeah, there's a lot of things that go into engaging with those individuals, in general. So did that answer your question?
100%, because
Okay.
what I'm hearing is you're stressing this point without saying it expressly, which is that influencer marketing is all about relationships.
Oh yeah.
And you were stepping into this situation where you had nearly 20 influencers, ambassadors, and you had zero relationship with them. So you
Mhm.
had to create that from scratch, which meant that the organization had to give you the time and the bandwidth to
Right.
do that, because it does take time. There's no shortcuts to
Mhm.
building relationships at all.
Yeah, yeah, and thankfully, like, Reese was really on board with, like, and this is one thing I appreciate about working with Swim Outlet and my boss in particular. I can't give him enough praise for what he's done, but he was very thoughtful about how to layer on, like, things for me to do, and I think in the retail space, things move so fast. There's so many sales, so many things moving, so many things you have to do, and the way that he kind of protected me from that is layering on those priorities and those things that needed to be accomplished. So it allowed me that time that I needed to spend, 4 hours engaging with these ambassadors so that I got to know them and stuff like that. So I needed to call that out because I'm sure people that are watching this, especially in the retail space, you all know that it's super crazy with things that going on, sales that are going on, new products you're launching, all kinds of chaos, good chaos, but a lot of chaos.
Yeah,
So I
right.
thought that was a good call out.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I'm just curious, how is your program structured? So you're talking about high school and college students for
Mhm.
the most part.
Yeah.
Is it, they're getting free product or maybe discounted
Mhm.
product in
Mhm.
exchange for, some social media activity? Is that how that
Yeah,
basically
so
works?
the way we have it structured is it's very layered, right? Because we have some ambassadors that have paid partnerships with us and other brands, and those, they are paid, some of them, and then we also send them product. Whereas like our core group of ambassadors, I guess I would call them a core group. I don't really know. I just call them all ambassadors at this point. We call them
Yeah.
all a part of the Swim Outlet fam, but some of them are paid. Majority of them are we send them free product every month. So that could be a new suit that we're launching, a new collab with an Olympic athlete that we launched, whatever it might be. And then that's in exchange for basically 3 videos every month. So, and we have milestones, or not milestones, excuse me, missions that we give to them. And then, they just complete those missions and kind of roll with it that way. And then I go in every month and analyze the content that they made. I give them, we have like a criteria of, they didn't do it. It was a 2 level video, meaning it was like on average, it was a 3 level video, which was spectacular. And then I skipped one, but one was like, okay, this video could use some work. And then we attempt to provide feedback each month without getting too controlling, because that's something, I want to hit on here why you brought up that question, Mike, is you got to really ride a fine line, especially in the retail space, in my opinion, with creating an ambassador community, because you don't want to take away too much control of the creative freedom from the creator in and itself. You onboarded them for a reason. You believed in them for a reason. And so it's important that you provide some guidance and maybe a little bit of feedback, which you also have to be very strategic in wording, which I didn't know in the beginning. Reese had to teach me that. But that's also like a really important call out, I feel like, is you need to make sure that you're you're able to give them a little something, especially if they're making a one level video where you're not, it's just not hitting the mark for you. But also don't be too controlling over that, because then they're just going to get discouraged. And that's the last thing you want. And a lot of these people, at least for our community, are friends because we're all in the swimming space. And so we see each other at different meets and all kinds of stuff. So it's not as, I wouldn't say for us, it's not as big as like the fashion space or the cosmetic space, where I feel like those are massive, retail spaces where if you have an influencer come in, the likelihood of them knowing another one, especially at the micro influencer level, is pretty slim. But for us, because swimming is such a tight knit community and there really isn't a ton of ambassador communities in the swim space, a lot of these people like know each other and see each other. So yeah, again, I have no idea if that answered your question because I went all.
No, you absolutely did, in a couple of different ways. I really appreciate that you shared that detail about how you structure your program, because everybody approaches this kind of thing differently. There's no one playbook for how to do an influencer program within an
Right.
organization. And
Yeah.
so a lot of the times our organizations were struggling to figure out, well, what's going to work? What's going to make sense? What are people going to actually appreciate? And I can't stress enough how important the point you made is about allowing influencers and creators to be creative. Do
Yeah.
not give them too many guardrails that will blow up in your face for a variety of reasons. They won't appreciate the micromanagement, and the output won't be what they're used to, what you
Right.
hope to have, and therefore what their audience expects. And so it's not going
Mhm.
to perform. And
Right.
it's funny you mentioned how tight knit your community is, because at Agorapulse we're the same way, right? We're dealing with social media influencers, people who are speaking on stages and going to events and blogging or making videos about social media, and that's a small select group, and we
Mhm.
all know each other. I mean, you and I know we're in this
Yeah.
community. We know each other and
Yeah.
we see each other, and those relationships are hugely important. Folks,
Mhm.
we're talking with Jeremy Linaburg about the many challenges working with influencers and external advocates. And I've got a bunch more questions for Jeremy. But before we get to those, Neil Schaefer, talking about those peers in the industry, Neil Schaefer has some great thoughts to share about the importance of using a tool to stay on top of conversations, whether with advocates or with prospects and clients.
Social gets quite complex because you need to be everywhere all the time. And you need a tool. It is a lot of data, it's a lot of conversations, and even if you are a single brand and you're trying to do this yourself, it's a lot of different channels. So you need to be able to handle all this in a very, very efficient way. Let me tell you, I've gone through the history, starting with TweetDeck, and then Hootsuite, and I've sort of moved on because I know that spending an hour a day doing this or spending 15 minutes a day doing this is a huge gap in terms of efficiency, and it allows me to focus on the actual engagement with people. That's where the magic happens, right? So if you don't use the right tool, you miss out on the opportunity. You miss out on conversations. You miss out on sort of the history of your relationships with these people. And you might miss out on an entire social network because you're not able to flip through them easily like you can in Agorapulse. Say, oh wow, I already have 10 notifications in my Facebook. I've been ignoring it. I got to get in there, right? And all the other features that Agorapulse brings. Now, Agorapulse has stayed the course. And one of the things I love about Agorapulse and not a lot of people talk about are the reports. The reports are awesome. As an agency, I will often use the reports. I will customize them. I will not use everything that's in there, but they are a firm basis to show the ROI of what you're doing in social to your clients or to your boss.
So, Jeremy, you mentioned earlier on that you spent months, literally, getting to know these advocates, these ambassadors for your organization, these influencers. And then you also spent time, and you continue to spend time recruiting additional ones to grow that program once you had that base in place. How long would you say overall? And maybe there's no real answer because it's just an ongoing thing. But how much time have you put into all this? And what are some of the results that you've seen from all this work?
Yeah, so I would say initially, and these are going to be ballparked like numbers and timelines, but I started in February of 2023. And I would say the first 6 months of my entire, time at Swim Outlet was focused on, getting to know these ambassadors, getting to know the social strategy, getting to know the content, getting to know these people that create content for us. And so I would say that's about how long it kind of took. And then, to even further that, we're continuing to learn because we just have a new we just had a new batch of ambassadors come in. So we're going to have to get to know them a little bit better, get to know what they like, what they don't like, how they create those types of things. Because sure, their page might say one thing, but once they get our suits, it might spark a creative idea or thought in their mind, and they might start creating content that we've never seen before. And so it's just kind of a flowing process of continuously getting to know these individuals and continuing to develop the program along with, again, our social strategy.
Love it. And I'm glad you brought up your overall social strategy because you've mentioned that a couple times. I think that's fascinating. You've got a social strategy that is truly combining your own activity with that of your influencers. How are you measuring the business impact of social media today?
Yeah, so for us, our main focus is obviously because we're a retail brand, our main focus is going to be sales and stuff as well. But the main focus specifically with the ambassador program is to continue getting out the word of Swim Outlet and Sporty and building that brand awareness perspective of it and really dial in on creating. So it's kind of multifaceted, right? And I can dive into this briefly, but I don't want to give away too much. But the thing for us is that if you go and look at our social media channels, you're going to see a style of content, a style of social strategy that is very prevalent. If you go and look at the sporty side of things, it's high energy, it's very inviting, it's very fun, it's funny, it's whimsical. Whereas if you go and look at the social, or excuse me, the swim outlet side of things, it's a little more tapered in just because we're dealing with so many various brands. But along with that, we really pride ourselves on doing that really well. Like there might be a little more stricter video that's focused around drill work, where there might be a comedic video, that's absolutely hilarious, or there might be a trending video there's a trend going on, in culture, but we spun it to fit the swim space. And all of those attributes come together because of the community that we're building and the swimming community that we've currently built. And so I think it's really fascinating, and I nerd out about on this stuff. Like Mike said in the beginning, I'm a big social and community nerd. So to be able to see the way that you're building a community and then they're leveraging what you're giving to them to create content that, I would say 90% of the time performs on our platforms says a lot to us. And we're talking about, millions of views. We're talking about thousands and thousands of likes on these videos, which is ultimately helping spread our brand to people that might have never seen it before. Along with that, one thing that we like to do, and I think all of us should do this, is if you're pulling content from other places, trend jacking a little bit or going and seeing, a video that you like that you might want to use on your social page, always making sure to give credit, to the creator of that video originally. And that's one thing that our ambassadors are really grateful for is we are always shouting them out. We're always collaborating with them. We're always tagging them in the comments section or in the caption section, because ultimately that's going to make that consumer or even a potential consumer, if we don't use any of our ambassador stuff, realize that you see them, realize that you recognize the amazing content that they're creating. And that's what ultimately builds brand loyalty. And so it's just really fascinating the way, like, if you create it correctly and adjust it and keep on moving and try to twist it in different ways while also analyzing what's happening, you can do really cool things with it. So that's just one of the ways that we kind of like measure the success of our community. And then, another layer even on top of that is we do a lot of like sales focused. It's interesting because a lot of our sales focused content is in our Instagram stories because we don't want to exhaust the current social community that we already have. And so knowing that it's only up there for 24 hours and then pops off is good enough for us in our opinion. So it's also being strategic with that of when to sell, when not to sell, when to put, a sales post in feed, when to not. We do launches throughout the year as well, which is super important to our overall social strategy, and trying to parallel those launches with different brands along with when we want to run sales, and knowing that, okay, we just ran a sale for a week, our audience might be exhausted of that. Maybe we shouldn't launch a new collection right after that because they're exhausted. They're not going to want to buy. So it's thinking through those things along with our incredible marketing team to make sure that we're being super efficient on our social channels is ways that we kind of measure success.
Love it. And I love that you actually called out. You have a very specific tone and voice
Mm.
for your channels, and you know what that is, and you stick with that. That's fantastic. Now, you talked about trying to find influencers. You've talked about UGC content. Are there specific tools that you're using for those endeavors? And are there any other tools in your tech stack that are really
Mhm.
helping you with all of your social media?
So tools wise, we use, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I'm blanking on it. We use Akana Square, I think is what it's called,
Okay.
to kind of analyze like all the data and competitors and all of that kind of stuff within Swim Outlet. And so that's one of the tools. The other tool that I like to use on a daily basis that we use is what's called SnapTick. And that allows us to pull basically TikTok videos from the TikTok account, put them in the SnapTick, and then we are able to cross promote and leverage that content in a variety of ways that doesn't have the TikTok logo on it. And that's a tip. So that's something that's really key in our social strategy, is because we're a team of two for the social team, like we have to be very strategic on how to repurpose content and leverage it in a variety of ways. Again, we have Twitter, LinkedIn, or no, excuse me, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok for both organizations. So, or both brands, I should say. So it's a lot of content that we're posting. And so Snaptick helps us with TikTok content and gathering it and that kind of stuff. And then we also use an app. This one's paid, I believe. I need to look on my phone because I can't remember the name of it. It's called Repost. And we use that a lot for getting content from Instagram and being able to, repurpose it. You just copy the link, put it into there, and then go from there. But those are like the main tech stack, I would say. And then I do all of my editing on videos in app and in itself. As if you're a social media manager and watching this, I'm sure you've seen that a bunch of articles and things coming out about if you're editing in the app, it's more likely to do well on the algorithm. So a lot of the times we just use the in-app editing functions. And I personally like to edit in TikTok more and then just save the video and then cross post it to Instagram. So that's kind of the tech stack that I run with. And then we also, if I'm not focusing on that part of in terms of reposting content, I do a lot of the content on our website. So for anybody that's listening or watching, if you go to our website and you go to one of our collections that we've launched with one of the Olympians, you'll see these little UGC style videos that pop up in like the corner of the screen. I create all of those as well. And so for those voiceovers that might be on those videos or the captions that might be along our paid social content, I use, and you're going to have to hang on one second. I always forget the names of all of these. I use Subcap and CapCut along with Canva to create those, different variations or things for different channels that we're kind of using. So in my world, it's not really like my sole job is not focused on just community or just social strategy. It's really focused on making sure that we have content flowing at all directions that represents who we are and our brands.
Fantastic. A lot of great tips and resources baked all into that. I love it. What other resources do you have? We're talking about like people, blogs, podcasts, events, etc., that you turn today to keep up with everything that's happening in social media.
Yeah, so again, being a nerd and that kind of stuff in this space, I spend majority of the time the first hour to 2 hours just, and this might be a lot for some people, but this isn't even logging on to Swim Outlet stuff. This is just my own personal consumption. going into emails, and I subscribe to a lot of different newsletters. I also love to read. So I go in, and Social Media Today is one of them. Jack Appleby's Future Social is one of them. Tommy Clark's Social Files is the name of his, and many, 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 many more. Rachel Henlock, I think is her name. I go and look at her stuff as well. So there's a lot of articles and newsletters that I kind of look at. So those are just some off the top of my head. I love me some good morning brew marketing. I go into
Mm-hmm.
that one often. And then once I'm done there, transparently, I tend to hop into the Social Media Pulse community for you guys and go in and just kind of see what's being talked about, what's stirring in there. I like to go into there's one other social media manager group that I'm a part of. I can't remember the name of it. Mike, you'll have to put the link of it in the notes or something. We'll figure that out. But it's focused on retail social media managers. And so I go and kind of sift through that. I don't really
Wow.
post that much. And that's not a really large group. It is a closed group, but there it isn't super active, but I always just go on there just to check to see if somebody posted or something like that. I also go into, this isn't helpful to anybody on here, but I go into a swim group and see, again, swim Facebook group, and see kind of what's going on there. And then in terms of people, like, I'm always paying attention to Twitter. That's a place that I love, or X, whatever you want to call it. I'm calling it Twitter. That's what I started calling it. And so I'm always going on there. I follow a lot of social media managers there. Bree Fleming. Oh gosh, who else? Christine Gritman, Chi. I love some of her.
Gee.
I love her content. And sometimes it's not even some of the Tommy Clark, Jack Appleby, these people, like, sometimes their content isn't even strictly focused on social media, but the post that they did is something funny that is pertaining to social media, or something that might have happened within the space the last couple of hours. And so I even appreciate that style of content as well, because it could spark a thought for me that we can turn into something in the swimming space. So I go there, and then after kind of looking at Twitter and those newsletters, I pop over into LinkedIn and just kind of see what's being talked about there. I believe his name is Nathan. I think it's Trong is his last name. He has posted a lot of phenomenal content on just influencers and ambassador marketing and that kind of stuff, which has been really helpful to me, because again, I'm learning it and still trying to, grow in what we're doing. So those are just some of the things that I kind of look at, and I'm sure there's many more out there, but that's just kind of what I look at. So
Fantastic. What a great list. Folks, we'll research all of these and we'll have all the correct links and names and everything in the show notes. Don't worry, just scroll down if you're listening. And I particularly love your morning routine because I'm the same way. I have a core set of newsletters that I
mhm.
subscribe to. I get them every single morning. In fact, one of the feedback I've given to Phoebe at Marketing Brew is I wish your newsletter came earlier in the day because it's typically
Yes,
like midday,
yes,
mid afternoon,
mhm,
and I don't always have time to open it at
right,
that point. And whereas if it came in the morning and it's right there with, Morning Brew, the Times,
yep,
Jack Appleby's Future Social, you
yep,
know, that's when I'm doing my reading. That's when I have that time set aside to do
yeah.
just that.
Yeah, another one that I wanna throw in there, there's actually 2, is, I just thought of this, Mike, so I apologize, but oh my gosh, Marketing Millennials. I love looking
Oh
at,
yeah.
Daniel Moret is the writer of that one, and then also, oh my gosh, I cannot think of his name. Schaefer, what's his first name?
Neil.
Yes. No,
Yeah, we had
I
him
think
in, yeah,
it's
we
Neil.
played his
I don't
video earlier.
No,
Oh, not,
that's
oh,
who it
Mark
is.
Schaefer.
Mark Schaefer, yes. I
Mark
do
Schaefer.
subscribe to Neil's newsletter as well, but Mike's is who I was thinking of. I really like his as well, and he's just so much, it's like very thought leadership, very
Yes.
like dialed into topics that are super nitty-gritty, and I just, like I said, I nerd out on that stuff. I love that. So, yeah, those are 2 more that I wanted to add in there that I forgot about, so
Fantastic. Thanks for that. We'll give Neil and Mark and everyone we talked about links and shout outs. Jeremy, you've been amazing. This has been such a fun interview. Thank you. And I'm being transparent when I say this. I've been doing influencer marketing and running the ambassador program for 6 years. And I
mm.
still took notes and you gave me ideas and things I didn't think about or know about. So thank you for that. Where can folks connect with you to learn more about you and Swim Outlet?
Yeah, so you can follow myself. Again, I'm pretty active on all social channels, but I like to hang out on Twitter and LinkedIn. LinkedIn will just be Jeremy Linaburg. And then on Twitter, it's going to be Linaburg_Jeremy. You can find me there. Would love to connect with you, especially, if you're in the retail space, social media manager, that kind of thing. I love talking about that kind of stuff. And then obviously, I would love for you, if you're a swim lover or just interested in learning more about Swim Outlet and Sporty, I would love for you to follow us at Swim Outlet on all social platforms, and then at Sporty Swim on all social platforms.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jeremy. And thank you all for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Social Pulse Podcast Retail Edition. Don't forget to find us on Apple and drop us a review. We'd love to know what you think. Until next time. Thank you for listening to another episode of Social Pulse Podcast Retail Edition, hosted by Mike Allton and powered by AgoraPulse, the #1 rated social media management solution, which you can learn more about at agorapulse.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast player and be sure to leave us a review. Your feedback is important to us.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.